Thanks everyone for coming today. We're going to lead the talk on how to make open data useful through our learnings of getting Citygram up and running in both Charlotte and Lexington. To introduce ourselves, I'm Livia and I'm a visual designer working with Team Lexington. This is Eric, he's a software engineer working with me in Lexington. And this is Danny Wayland, also a software engineer working with Charlotte. So to break down the talk today, we're going to first discuss what is Citygram, just in case any of you missed the brief presentation on the main stage yesterday. How does it work? Why was it built this way? How can you get involved? And how did this work in Lexington? So Citygram, both Citygram and this workshop will be about designing for the community. Its initial intention was guided by thinking about how Code for America brigades and local communities could deploy this project and work with it for the folks over there. Citygram is a notifications platform for subscribing to your city. It uses the power of open data to inform you about the things that you care about, where you care about them. The three goals that have guided us in this project have been, one, to increase citizen engagement by providing automated and meaningful information about what the city is doing, and to be proactive. When we were in Lexington, especially talking to legislative aides and the folks over at 311, most of their work was guided by responding to complaints that came to them. So we would love to work out, one of the main guiding principles has been, how can we deliver information to folks before they find a reason to complain about it or to they feel like they're left in the dark. So, and thirdly, to demonstrate what you can do with your open data portal. Often open data portals are there and it's great, but they can be kind of dusty and there are tumbleweeds because no one really knows what to do with it. So we're starting with the need first here. And then Danny will talk a little, actually first, let's do a video demo of Citygram so we can see how it works. Okay, so this is Citygram in Charlotte, and currently these are the different topics, and you can select one that you care about. Enter in your street address. That can either be your home address or work, depending on what area you care about. And then we've offered a few different radiuses, so you can choose the distance through which you want to get all this information. Okay, and currently we have text message notifications where you get the updates as they show up in the open data portal. And we've also started the email digest, so you could get one weekly email digest with all of the updates that happened in the last week. Alrighty, now I'll hand this over to Danny.
Thanks for coming, everyone. My name's Danny Wayland. I wanted to just let you know that this talk is going to get a little bit technical, but I think that's okay. This is somewhat of a technical problem, but I think you'll kind of see how these parts fit together, hopefully. So I wanted to talk about sort of understanding the constraints of solving a problem like this to begin with. And to start, I think it's really important to understand that so civic apps are not the intended use case for this data. And that's something that sort of goes unsaid, although it's understood by developers through that friction that you feel. But it's just something to keep in mind as you do this. And I think in the future, this may, through programs like the Brigade, I think cities will start to understand that if they sort of design their collection and input and storage systems around the use cases of these broader networks of people that are interested in this data, that this will actually yield big benefits. So speed, government data systems aren't really designed to be fast. They're designed to be useful and to go through a particular process, but speed isn't usually a priority. If it is in your city, maybe I would love to hear about that. So there's also the sort of what we're calling the cadence of data. Data reflects the processes through which it was created, and this becomes really, really apparent in government. So you may have paper forms that get bulk processed once a month. You might have online forms that flow directly into your government into your internal systems and then right into an open data portal, sort of in a streaming flow. And that's the ideal flow, but we don't see that as often as we'd like, right? A lot of times you see batch processes. So these are some of the larger constraints that come into play building something like Citygram. All right, so these are some of the places you can get data from the city of Charlotte. The point of this slide is to show that there are many of them. Eventually, these will be centralized into one open data portal so you have a consistent interface to all these pieces of data. But when we got into Charlotte, it wasn't that way. But they're working towards it, and we're making a lot of progress in that. So we designed Citygram to plug into any data source that had the correct type of data. And that was a really important constraint for ours. Not to sort of couple the system to a particular system or a particular vendor or anything like that. This is Charlotte's open data portal where things will be centralized. And as things move towards this direction and more of the data sets can be accessed through a central place, that friction will be lowered and things will smooth out. And we're looking forward to when that starts to happen. So some quick guiding principles. User experience design, there are actually a number of different users that we focused on in Citygram. So there's the end person who receives an email or a notification, but departments are a major stakeholder in this process. The data stewards and their user experience for integrating a data set into Citygram matters a lot to us. If we can lower that barrier to a point where there's not a lot of pain and we can just sort of automate the process, that's a big win for us. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about that. Another user that we focused on are the brigades, designing for communities. A project of this scope, it's not really something that can be accomplished by a small team of people, and that's why brigades are so powerful, because they're everywhere. They know their city, they know their city's data, and that's really, really important. So agile development, we started small with core features, and then we put it out there and let people try it, and then we incorporated their feedback, and that's where we got things like email digests. Because maybe land development data doesn't really fit into, I don't want to get a text message about it, but an email digest every week makes a lot more sense. So features like that kind of came out of user testing and being able to be flexible. Okay, so flexibility. This is really what I was talking about, plugging into many different data sets. So we don't know where all the data is all the time, or what system it's in, or how we'll be able to access it. So building it with absolute flexibility is really critical. We'll talk about how we achieve that, in part by embracing data standards. And then generalizable. So shared problems, shared solutions is sort of a notion that you heard in our talk yesterday about Citygram. And we're really hoping that this project is found useful in a lot of different cities. And there's really nothing holding that back right now. So we're working hard to make that happen. So this was a sort of a sketch we did early on of this idea. And I think it was pretty useful in helping us communicate to folks in the city, to the brigade, and to the data stewards what we were trying to do. We just have information feeds in an abstract way. There's no concreteness to that because we don't actually know what it is. And then, so this was, the early name of this app was What's Happening, or What's Hap, it's just kind of a working title. But really we need some sort of time component. The time we care about is sort of right now or near into the future, right? Sort of a capital project that's 5-10 years off the road doesn't quite fit as well in this use case. And then we need specific topics so that a person can say, I care about land development, I care about it in this area, and I want to know about things that are about to happen or are currently in process. And then we can just send that off to the user by collecting the events, sort of doing this intersection and sending out notifications. So here's a more formalized architecture of what's actually going on. And so this type of system is like a geographic publish subscribe system, GeoPubSub. It's not really a new idea. This is just a new take on it. And so what I think is really interesting about this is this is the flexibility we were talking about, right? So maybe it's going into a data portal, maybe it's not. But if it's not in the open data portal, we can still work with it. So this layer we call it an ETL layer, extract, transform, load. That's really about data transformation, taking data from one place, transforming it, putting it into another place. And what's unique about this architecture compared to other geopubs on platforms that get data from various places is that this ETL layer doesn't actually live in Citygram. It lives with the community. It's built by the community, and it was intentionally designed that way. So these could be one or many standalone applications, and their job is solely to, upon request, Citygram will say, is there any new data here? Basically say, give me the latest 100 or 1,000 records from your database. And this actually then goes and pulls from the open data portal, does a transformation, likely whatever the data is coming out of your open data portal, maybe not likely, but it's not necessarily going to be in a standard format. So what this ETL layer does, the extraction is HTTP. We make a web request, some type of transformation, and then the loading is actually a representative of some kind of caching in the system, so that we don't, if we were to continually make requests really quickly, it's not actually hitting your open data portal every time. So maybe we have a 10-minute cache, or an hour cache, or a 3-day cache. So that's where that time to live for the cache depends on the cadence of the data. So if it's updated once a month, we can have a really long cache and totally take the burden off the open data portal in terms of resources. Another big benefit of this architecture is because these ETL pieces don't live in Citygram, they're now generally useful. Other people can use them. You just built something that transforms something into, in the case of Citygram, GeoJSON. So GeoJSON is a pretty common format for handling geographic data sets on the web. And we found it pretty useful for Citygram because it does actually everything we need. And so if you can, we'll kind of see how we built these out, but Citygram just knows about GeoJSON, and it just knows a URL where it can go get new data, and that's it. Sure.
Do you only have it where Citygram is polling, or do you have it where these feeds can post into it without the need to approve it?
So it's currently polling. We originally, actually, the architecture was designed with sort of an evented webhook system where you would post to Citygram. That's just putting more burden on this ETL layer. And what we were trying to do for departments and for brigades is to lower that. And so Citygram is polling all of these endpoints every 10 minutes, and that's worked fine.
Does it address emergency like water outages or things of that nature? Or is this more kind of like what's the pulse going on within the city?
Yeah, so the data types, so what kind of data you use is sort of up to the citizens. The citizen need should drive that in your particular city. So we won't actually talk about, we'll give some examples of data sets like land development, but we're not being prescriptive about what data works and what data doesn't.
And have you thought about partnering like with other agencies that affect the resident, like utility companies or things of that nature?
Sure.
Like your companies that they could also use this? Is it open in the sense that you can actually go out to external data?
Sure.
On that platform?
I'm not sure if the audio is picking that up, so I'll just repeat the question to the mic, which was, have we thought about partnering with other people that have data like utility companies or private companies? We have thought about that, and that is certainly a possibility. We think even more important than that is community groups. So neighborhood associations, things like that want to send out, here's in my neighborhood, here's some an event that's going on in the near future, can we send that out? So this is how Citygram works. It's just has a geography and embraces data standards and does an intersection. So.
Can you walk through the use case of somebody signing up for notifications of zoning changes?
Sure, I think it would be more useful to ask that maybe towards the end because we might go through some of that, yeah. Okay.
I had a quick question
Sure.
about, so right now the city has control over what gets included into your see, like, for example, if a business or businesses wanted to kind of market
Sure.
their business in the city, is this something that could be used for that purpose as well?
Sure. I think it could be a lot of things, I think, and that would be one of them. But we really, the use case that we focused on is how can we get government data in the hands of citizens in a meaningful way. So talk quickly about integrating your data sets. So how does a data set become a Citygram topic? So we're looking for, again, like citizen needs should drive this. And so if you're a brigade and you want to integrate this, or you're a department, if you're a city department and you want something like this to happen, I think your step one is talk to the brigade. That is step number one. So we need this data to be consistently updated. The batch processing, if your processes are really batch and they sort of 1,000 records once a month, that's not really as useful. And so we really encourage you. So we've kind of, we had to make a trade-off. Either we could work with, sort of make accommodations for batch data sets, or we could just really encourage people to have good flows of data and good processes behind it. The data really needs to be accessible via an API. Emailing someone a spreadsheet and then them uploading it in some format that Citygram can read. We really believe that having an automated workflow all the way through is the right way to do this. And if you have sort of a human process involved there, the opportunity for error and the chance of failures just goes way up.
Can you explain what an API is?
So API is just a way to retrieve machine readable data over the internet. And sorry if I don't define terms really well. At the end, we'll have time for a Q&A as well. And then a time and geo component. So we've seen some cases where folks have geographic data sets, like really rich geographic data sets that they store and manage, maybe in Arc or something like that, but they don't timestamp the data. That is like, you need to have timestamps. So when the record was created, timestamp it. When it gets updated, have a secondary updated at timestamp. That way we can order and say, what are the new records? And not say, like, let's get all the data every time and then just deduplicate it. So we really, really need timestamps. And geographic components, anything that could be represented in GeoJSON, Citygram can deal with, which is most things.
What has been the citizen feedback on this so far for individuals who have signed up for it?
Um,
And how many
sure.
subscribers?
Can I answer that more at the end?
Sure.
Okay. So this is another really important part. I hope that, especially for land development or for like more project-based things like rezonings, sort of the way we think about this is those things form the code base of your city. This is sort of the living, breathing code base of your city, and it's changing, and the city manages that change process, or they merge those pull requests is kind of the way we think about it. So we think that that's important information to get out there and to do it well. So if you have a site like this where people can go and track projects, that's really useful. Now Citygram can say, pass through some data and give you a link to the city's page. So we don't, Citygram shouldn't be sending all of the project data down to you. That's really not what it's for. And so what we've designed and what you'll see here is we've designed messages with a really specific intent. So here's some raw data. This is civicdata.com, Charlotte's land development data. And this is what it looks like when you pull it out of the API. This is just tabular JSON. It's column names and values, and then it would be in some type of collection out of the API. So we need to be able to pull out what is relevant to citizens. So we figure out what they want to know the address maybe. Here's the URL to the site where they can kind of track the project, maybe bookmark that and come back to it. The project description ends up being really useful, and maybe some kind of category. And you can see here's X, Y coordinates. That's the geographic component in this data set. And so actually, all of that data could be useful. We don't know what. But what we're trying to do is reach sort of a minimum level so that when we send a notification, it's just enough information for the person to know whether or not they want more information about that. That's sort of the threshold of the notification, and we think that's what's most useful for citizens.
Does it link to the city's website if they do want more information?
Absolutely. And you can see that here. This is great. If your API returns a URL, so Seattle does this really, really well. Charlotte's done this really, really well. Give us a URL to the resource that we're pulling out of your open data portal. If you can do that, that would be great. If you don't have a URL for a rezoning or for a land development project or for something like that, maybe start asking, why don't we? Would this be useful for citizens that they can track a project ongoing into the future? And so here's sort of that human machine speak to human speak process, right? We define a natural language template. Actually, Citygram doesn't define this template. Whoever owns the data integration, it could be a department, it could be the brigade, or them working together. Likely, we think that departments working together with brigades is the best option here. You have the subject matter experts, and then you have brigades who want to help and have the technical and web knowledge to do an integration like this. So you come together and you define a template. And this template, again, is just the minimal amount of information to pass along so that the citizen can decide whether they want more information. So we pull out the specific elements that we think are useful, and then we template it into some natural language and send it out. And here's your link for more information. Question?
I'm just thinking about building this with something for text messages, which I'm very familiar with on Twilio.
Mm-hmm.
So there's how are you doing this in a way that's low cost and accessible, or is there a cost component?
Sure. There's definitely a cost component to sending out SMS. Email is a lot cheaper. I'm just doing a time check real quick. Okay. Email is a lot cheaper. That would be something that kind of has to get worked out on the fly. You'll see when I talk a little bit more about the future vision of this, how we hope to actually sort of solve that problem. And that's about designing for the community and making this generally useful. Okay, so that's, sure?
I don't know if this is kosher to ask, but are we assuming everybody has an iPhone or an Android that we can click on a URL?
That is true. I think that as long as you have, right, if you just have a feature phone or something that can just receive text messages, then you would definitely need to have another machine and copy the URL over. We can also do email, which I think has the same issue. So we're also leaving open the opportunity. So you can receive right now text. I was going to talk about this a little later, but I think it's fits this point. We also do something called webhooks. So we'll send you an email, we'll send you an SMS, but we can also, a developer or a brigade can subscribe and basically give us a URL that they own, and we will send all of the data in a machine-readable format back to them when it happens in the area that they care about for that topic. And then they can build useful things on top of that and hopefully solve problems like that. Maybe it's some visual display somewhere that someone can work off of, or even more creative things that we really haven't thought of. So we tried to, we knew we couldn't solve all the problems. We just tried to leave it open-ended to let other people jump in and find solutions.
Yeah, have you thought about doing like an add-on or an RSS feed for yourself?
Yeah. So effectively, that's what we're doing with the email digests. We're just not publishing it as RSS yet. But yeah, totally. Like last week of events for a particular subscription, absolutely. That's also, so a big benefit there is you don't have to share your contact information, right? We just give you a URL. And we think that's a big win too. So we would like to get there. Pull requests welcome on that one. Okay, so this is Citygram as a platform. And this goes to sort of the cost in Twilio and hosting something like this. There's sort of there is some complexity to this project, but we did a lot to reduce the maintenance burden as much as possible. And city departments, resources are scarce, and so we prioritized maintainability of this project very, very seriously. And so what we'd like to do is so this is kind of up in the air right now. It hasn't been decided. We need to talk to more brigades and get more feedback on this. But what if, rather than this traditional model of sort of redeploying applications over and over again, there is just citygram.org, and you can say subscribe to, select menu, pick your city, and then go and get any data you want. That means shared database, shared cost of SMS, shared cost of whatever notification systems you have. And I'm still trying to work out the best sustainability plan. I think we, in conjunction with Charlotte, brigades, CfA, we're trying to figure out what is the best way for this to live and be most useful broadly. The administration overhead of onboarding new data sets is something we think we can automate with Google Forms or something like this. Here's a checklist. Does your data set meet this checklist? Are you, and then your integration. So this integration is, this is trusted data. Like, we need to trust the person that's building the integration, or the persons, the groups, because we don't write the messaging, and we don't determine whether or not the data is useful. So we need to be able to trust that source to do that for us. And then Citygram just handles that sort of legwork of getting the data to the people that want it. And so right now we've got a couple of deploys. We'd like to see, Citygram, like charlotte.citygram.org or lexington.citygram.org, something like that. Okay. So I want to talk about Spyglass, this is going to get a little bit more technical, but when you pull data out of these APIs, it needs to be transformed into GeoJSON. That's what Citygram speaks right now. And Citygram pulls for the data, so every 10 minutes it says, it hits that ETL layer and says, I'd like the most recent data so I can see if there's any new records in there. But it needs it as GeoJSON. As more and more open data portals provide this data in different formats, then we'll be able to sort of knock out that intermediate layer and just retrieve the data straight from the authoritative source. For the time being, we need some way to transform it. And so what we've developed is a way to, it's actually not a new idea, it's just sort of a new application of it. And so what Spyglass is sort of an API adapter. The technical term for this is Web Content Transformation Proxy. A proxy is just, you hit it, it sort of is an intermediary for a web request. And I'm going to just real quick show you what that would look like. I'm sorry to be pulling code up if it doesn't really help the case here, but how visible is that? I don't know how useful this is going to be right now, but effectively, I think the transformation is the big piece here. So this is the Socrata data set, and basically we're proxying requests through to data.sfgov.org. And we go and we make the same request that was requested to this endpoint to data.sf.gov. We transform the records that come back into GeoJSON and send it back out. So this is on-the-fly data transformation through your API. It's an API adapter because not all of your data is going to come out as GeoJSON. So if traditionally with GeoPub subsystems, this has been built into the system itself, but that means every time the data changes or the schema changes or you want to update the message, you have to make a commit to Citygram and then redeploy Citygram. So what we've done is we built in a seam so that you have separate deployments. You can also use different programming languages. If these transformations were built into Citygram, the only way you could contribute is if you knew Ruby. But now you can do it in the language of your choice. This is a particular tool we built in Ruby, but it could be rebuilt in any language. And I'll just flip back to the slides. So now you also have separate deployments. Citygram does not need to be redeployed for you to change the message that you're sending out.
So where are you proposing they live?
So right now we're just running them like in our own, they're just on Heroku right now, but they could run anywhere.
Set up our own.
Yeah, yeah. So and they don't have so it doesn't have to have a database requirement either. They don't have to be stateful. So you can just like on the fly transform these things. We've just been running a free Heroku instance, making thousands and thousands of HTTP requests through it with no problems. So I think it's a really useful pattern. And if, regardless of what happens, like with Citygram in the future, I hope that this pattern gets applied to more projects around open data, because this sort of pluggability API adapter pattern has been really, really useful. Question?
I don't want to drag it too much out.
That's okay.
How are you figuring out it's not a duplicate? Is that the transforms job?
Yeah. So the GeoJSON that Citygram, actually, let's look at Seattle building permits. The GeoJSON format, so it's a feature collection that we get back. GeoJSON features have an optional ID at the top level. So that ID at the top level is how we deduplicate. So in terms of this being a trusted data set, we also need to trust that you're sending us a unique ID. And yeah, there are some...
Citygram is arbitrating whether it's...
Yeah, so Citygram has effectively aggregates everything that it sees before.
So I've seen it.
Yep, seen it. And so you can also see in here, here's the message. So I think what this highlights is so this is coming from the trusted data source, which is hopefully a brigade working in conjunction with a department. And they've crafted the language, and it gets passed through to Citygram. So this is the architectural difference between Citygram and a lot of other sort of GeoPub subsystems. And also, you can have like arbitrary caching in this layer based on the cadence of the data, which is what you see here. It's just like a 5-minute in-memory cache. So sorry for a little technical dive there, but web content transformation proxies, it's a W3C guideline right now. It was originally designed actually for desktop websites to be on the fly transformed into mobile-friendly formats. So we're effectively applying this same pattern just to not to navigational data formats, but to more API data formats, JSON in this case. So I want to just say a quick thank you to Lexington. They jumped in. So fellowships move fast in Code for America, and for two teams to be able to work together effectively, it's sort of like two cars driving down a freeway really fast, and somehow like it makes sense to link up those cars, and it doesn't happen very often. And we were extremely fortunate that the Lexington team and the needs of these two cities kind of synced up, and we were able to work with them on this project. And so I'm going to invite Eric Schwartz up to talk about the legwork that they had to do, opening the data up, and then what the integration with Citygram was like. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Yeah, and I think, as Danny mentioned, yeah, it is difficult. It can be really difficult to make these things work, and I think the reason we were able to make it work is because they did such a great job of making the system decoupled in a way that we were able to contribute and to integrate with it without having to have this incredibly coordinated effort all of the time, which speaks a lot to their smarts. So yeah, we're in a sense, I think we're sort of the first consumers of this project. So we were, we were trying to figure out what is it actually like to integrate with Citygram and to get our data in the format and set up the publishing system. So I'm excited to talk about that with you all today. Yeah, so some of this will sound familiar, but it's, we're going through these steps and we're trying to think about the data that we have access to. And this year in Lexington, we've been really lucky. We've had access to a lot of interesting information, a lot of it around neighborhoods and neighborhood quality of life. So a couple good examples are code complaints and building permits were things that we had readily available. And so we just started to think about, okay, so we want to use Citygram. It sounds like Citygram needs us to create a GeoJSON file, and so we go down the path of figuring out how to do that. And of course, this is, I think, probably a theme that we've been talking about a lot in the last few days, but we really want to get to a point where we have this data that's really flowing all of the time, because that's what allows people to have notifications close to the time when they're actually interested in learning more about this. If it's a building permit, if somebody's starting a restaurant down the street from you, obviously it's great to be able to have that information now as opposed to after it's already complete and people are hanging out there and eating and stuff. So yeah, just it meets many more use cases if the information is available for people to get in more or less real time. So that's where we were trying to end up. Oh yeah, we did. If you want to go back in time, we did have a session about this earlier today. I suppose it'll be published, so people actually, they're sort of, that's a kind of a reality. So we to do this, we wanted to, and this is just, I think something that we all probably learn with some of these projects, is that we wanted to really integrate the entire system as quickly as possible to make sure that we are kind of like grabbing the information from our code enforcement database and getting that actually through to a text message on our phones through Citygram, and just making sure, like, making that first connection. And then from there, just basically doing that however we could in the most scrappy way possible, and then inching our way forward so that we get it into a more stable, sort of automated, robust system. So I kind of think of it as being like our code enforcement's over here, and we set up like a tin can, and then like drew a string over to the other side, and it's like that's our first iteration, just to draw that sort of path and see how it actually works. And then from there, we just, probably 2 or 3 iterations, we get it a little bit closer where we're able to kind of hit a button to update the code enforcement information and get it through all the way through to Citygram. And then probably the next step is to get that in a way that the computer does all that scheduling, and it just every half hour it goes and updates the code enforcement information out to the open data portal, and then from there it gets transformed and Citygram picks it up. So in terms of the actual tools that we were using, this is what we talked about a little earlier in the other session, but we started using something that they use in a lot of places, including the city of Chicago, a project called Pentaho Data Integration. And so what that is, so this is outside of Citygram context, really. It's just about how we take the information from, we'll say, code enforcement again. From the code enforcement, it's a Microsoft SQL database. We're able to query that database. I'll say Pentaho Data Integration queries that database, transforms the information, and then puts it up to our open data portal. And then from there, that's where we sort of kick off the process that Danny talked about with Citygram having the GeoJSON transforms. So we schedule that to be 2 times an hour as just because that seems like a roughly tenable schedule. Slight side note is that part of the work we did, which was, it just ended up being really useful, and we ended up talking about a lot this week, was the geocoding during that process. So we have our code enforcement over here, and it has address strings, and so we wanted to take that address information and put it on a map, basically. And so there's lots of ways to do this. We found that we actually were able to create our own geocoder, which is able to take that address string 123 Main Street and give it a lat long on a map based on the city's open parcel information. So that's something that we created the system called StreetScope, where if you have a city parcel file, that's actually sort of the canonical set of addresses, and especially if you have sort of parcels around that, then we found that it was actually a fairly approachable problem. And we were able to create a usable system that did pretty well with taking 123 Main Street or 123 Main STREET and sort of, understanding the nuances and the different ways that those addresses can be spelled. So that's sort of a side note, but that's a little bit of the story here too. Yeah, so of course, and that's something also that, of course, there are great, amazing minds working on this problem for years and years. So, Google has their great geocoder, or there's lots of other geocoders out there. So yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it. I'd say in our case, what we really liked about it was that we were able to have that city-specific information, which was the parcel. So that's one thing you might not get from using Google, is you're not able to tie this to a particular parcel if you have that in the city. So yeah, in Lexington's case, we're still looking at different ways to do the open data portal. We have a CCAN instance, if anybody's familiar with that. It's and there's other, just to throw out a few other names. There's like Socrata, there's DCAN, which is a sort of kind of CCAN. there are others. But so we're still looking at the best way to do that. We have sort of an older version of CCAN, and we're looking at moving forward. I think in probably a lot of cities' cases, and what we've learned is that the city really wants this to be something they don't have to spend a lot of time on or resources. So, and I think that goes back to like, can we make this open data thing work in a way that doesn't burden people? So there are civicdata.com. Estella talked about a little bit. They have that's a CCAN instance that they host for you as a managed service, and there are a few others. DataHub.io is another one that's actually run by the Open Knowledge Foundation, which is the company that runs, that sort of stewards the CCAN project. And then of course you have Socrata, and then others that you can think about. But just to give you a little bit of backstory about how we're thinking about the piece before we get to Citygram. Whoa, I hadn't seen this part of the slide yet. Nice job, Livian. That's extremely flexible. So yeah, we can do, the thing is that we were talking about open data portals, and open data portals can be part of this scenario, but the great news is that they don't have to be. Because of the way Citygram is set up, it can be, you can use kind of like whatever, if you have people who are really good with if you already have some automation and people like to use this automation, all they need to be able to do is create a GeoJSON file that lives on a web server somewhere. So there's just sort of, the great news is there are many different ways to do that, and chances are really good that even in a small city with not a ton of resources, somebody is going to be able to do that and in their pretty normal workflow. And then, so Citygram's able to work with it from there. Is there anything else huge to talk about? Yeah, so this is just that same idea. There's probably somebody who knows already how to do this, and you don't have to have like a fancy open data portal to make it work. Yeah, this that's so cute. There's that's the thing, and Danny spoke to this too, obviously earlier. But it's really about taking these like tabular, kind of inhuman data sources and getting to know them, and thinking about how to craft a message that resonates with people on some level, or informs them, and is useful for them. So the example here we had is, this is our actual code row from our code enforcement database, and it has, there's some stuff there, and so we looked through this and we thought about how to make something that was somewhat more human. And let's see. Oh, okay. So I guess that's the main thing. I think we ended up with our approach was sort of we crafted a message around that was. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Yeah, we crafted a message around that we're trying out in Lexington right now, and we're doing user testing to see if people are like understand what any of this means, or if they want something slightly differently. So that's what we're evaluating right now through user testing. And so that's probably always a good approach if you're rolling this out in your city, is to have some feedback mechanism so that you can hear back from people if they are actually understanding what's going on with these notifications. I'll kick it back over to Danny, I think, for last little bits.
Just wanted to open it up for questions. Reed?
So Danny, and congratulations to you and the team, Charlotte. So I was kind of thinking through the use cases of this idea of live, work, and play. And when I see your solution, my first thought is the live. But then if you want to do, for example, road closures, application in any city. So if you want to know when you're going to work, how does your app kind of work in the sense of drawing multiple different boundaries?
Yeah. So we originally built it so you could draw polygons on the map, or like arbitrary shapes. And we found that really useful. It's just really hard for the user to it wasn't clear what was supposed to happen there. We saw that over and over again. So we wanted to have a really easy use case. But if you wanted more complex polygons, I think we're going to have that as an option. So using a tool like Leaflet Draw, or something where you can draw boundaries, more complex shapes, maybe something that is your neighborhood. And that would be, and then so you can effectively have as many subscriptions in as many areas as you want. So that's, I think, maybe the other part of your question. Okay, cool. I'll take this question, then I'll take your question.
I have a question for the city. How did the city, or how did you get buy-in from the council or the mayor to even implement something like this, or just to get the ball rolling?
Let's see. I mean, we had talked about, this was actually something that a lot of the folks in the city that we worked with were already thinking about, just having more proactive communication in general. So that piece of it, I think that was pretty well teed up for us as we came in January, and they were pretty excited about it. And I think the idea that you can, this goes back again to the way Citygram is set up, the way that, the fact that you can have the messaging outside of the actual Citygram system so that the city can work with, let's say, the brigade to craft that message is something that really appeals to them. So I think it was a pretty easy sell, really. If you would add anything to that, but
DW co-captain with Long Beach, and we're bringing up an counter
Cool.
to Long Beach next.
Awesome.
With the price tag, it has a business model.
Yeah.
And foundation also backs it, right? So that's into Accelerator. You guys are wanting to roll this out as brigade initiated. We're all scrappy volunteers going to do it, and I'm curious, or I'm concerned about that because I mean, if we were going to try to do that with our brigade, we would just have volunteer collapse. So have you looked at some hybrid model or turn into a B Corp at some point?
So let me sort of dig into your question a little bit. When you say fall apart, do you mean if you were to redeploy Citygram and have to maintain an entire deployment of it?
Right.
So my vision is for that not to be the case. For that, we are working to solve that problem so that there can be one deploy, and then the data integrations would be, it's a much lower barrier and just much lower maintenance cost.
Well, I feel like our city, we find money for something like this.
Yeah.
And using other technologies that don't even get anywhere near where this can be,
Okay.
would be so much more expensive.
Right.
Just to think about procurement. So it's great, but
Yeah.
we find money. It's
So we're exploring a lot of different options. Maybe one of those is sort of like a local software consultancy maintains it for you, but we have some magic we're really trying to work, but it's sort of a slow process, and this is a project that came out of our work with the city of Charlotte because they have this, they have like an amazing amount of data and they have really amazing people, and so we are working with them to primarily we need to solve it for Charlotte, and then I think that solution can be shared among other cities. Not necessarily like the deploy, but the pattern of what that solution ends up being. But we should definitely talk more.
I actually have the same question. So if my city wanted to do this tomorrow,
Yeah.
how do we make that happen?
So if your city has a brigade, I would reach out to the brigade and then talk to us as well. So Citygram at codeforamerica.org goes to our entire team. So start there, but also like if you're either if you have an established relationship with your brigade, engage them, CC on this email to us, or
We don't have a brigade.
okay,
Yeah.
well start with us then, and we'll work with you. Yeah.
Okay, question. So at the beginning you mentioned that open data is how they use possibly after how they use it.
Sure.
And I was wondering if you can be maybe a bit more specific on what
Yeah.
you as a consumer of open data, what are the things that you would like the open data publisher to do? Formats is what you're asking for.
So it's really about the language. That's probably a theme that you've heard over and over again at this conference is like the language that government uses is not always what citizens want to hear or like are most able to hear. So we see this a lot with 311 data sets. Like you could explain, and this is because they have really built out CRM systems, and it's like more of pick a select box than type out a description. But like resident found manhole cover left off. That ends up being like sewer underscore cover dash like open not safe in like it's like some series of select options that led to this concatenated thing, but it doesn't mean anything, and we can't we'd have to parse that out and say like someone found an open manhole cover and it was deemed a safety concern, and so it was reported. Yeah. but you see that in all departments. Like, it's because it's for internal purposes. Like if I'm internal, I know what all that language means. It's actually easier for me to parse that. But maybe there's a way to, like, now that you understand this new use case and that it might be happening, can we be a little bit more descriptive with the information that we collect in our systems? And I think that almost could lift things up internally too. A little more care with the data. Care is maybe not the right word, but.
So I'm curious, so you got 2 data points, 2 cities, right? How much of a standard have you developed in terms of like those ETLs, arbitrary abstracting what the message is?
So I'm almost hesitant to start developing the standard yet. Like, I don't want to put the cart before the horse and say, like, this is how you should do it and this is the right way.
Require some.
Yeah, so we require in the properties of the GeoJSON feature, you have to have a title, and that's actually the notification. Maybe a better name for that would be message, but anyways, title, and then it needs a unique feature ID and it needs a valid geometry. And that's like, if you can pass a GeoJSON feature to us with a unique ID, valid geometry, and a title in the properties field, we'll go for that. Well, we can go with that. Good question. Make sure I have this on. Read?
Yeah, so this might be a little forward, so I apologize in advance.
It's okay.
Just seeing Nextdoor's presentation yesterday.
Totally.
I think they would be so interested in the way that you're crowdsourcing data. And then, because their model is they let neighbors draw boundaries. And
Sure.
They're having water cooler conversations within a boundary.
Sure.
So then to bring in your, basically well-dated mined information and then be able to alert those neighbors.
So I would totally be, like, I see the overlap, and I think they probably do too. So their bread and butter is like safety, crime and safety type of stuff, and I think they would probably tell you that. And I don't know how much they'd care about rezonings or land development. Maybe they do care about integrating that. I'd be happy to chat with them more. So I floated the idea.
Did you guys see that New York Times article about that modern house being built in the historic district? Made ABC News. So that's a good use case. So
okay.
would want to be alerted of those
Yeah, totally.
In the Austin context, our neighbors are very, very concerned about all the data sets that you put out.
Okay.
Crime is, sure, but we're going through a whole city code redevelopment and 150 people moving to Austin every day. And they are hypersensitive about the growth and the change in their neighborhoods. So they follow code compliance stuff like a hawk.
So I'll just clarify my language. And when I said what people are interested, I actually meant Nextdoor and not the citizens. Yeah. Because like they have their own product strategy. And I don't know, like their product strategy right now is like getting like health and safety and then getting police and fire kind of involved. So I don't know how well this fits into their product strategy. If it does, would love to talk to them. Yeah. Awesome.
We're probably right at time, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. I really
thanks very
appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.